Thank you. Almost got my name. That's good. So thank you for coming to my session called Control It in Supercharged. My name is Vjekoslav Babic. People usually know me as Vjeko, and I've been speaking at Tech Days for quite a while now. I would like to start just like Waldo did. I will ask you how many of you have been to my sessions before? No. Don't clap. You clap at Waldo's sessions. At my sessions, you raise hands. So okay, good. Wow, look at you. So, well, this is relaxing for me at least. This session is going to be about control-ins. What a surprise! And take seats and relax. There is no better time to sleep than just right after lunch. So, something is wrong with this. I think they have technical issues. Oh no, it's not. So. When we are developing control-ins, or at least the way we were mostly developing control-ins, or at least the way I saw most control-ins out there being developed, it sometimes feels like this. And what I want to do in this session, I want to take us all from this kind of tooling to this kind of tooling when it comes to control-ins. So let's see how far we can get. What is this session going to be about? It's going to be about making control-ins development work. And you may say, yes, my control-in development works, thank you very much, but remember the X. So we are going to talk about real stuff here. So we are going to talk about practices that work, practices that don't, and why they work and why they don't. We're also going to try to do development, web development, like web developers do, not like the accountants do. You know, when I speak to my MVP colleagues, like from those superior technologies like C# and Azure and stuff, they kind of joke with me like, what do you do at those Business Central and NAV conferences? You get together and what, post journals? And so, well, this is their perception of us. And our development sometimes looks to them just like that. So what I want to do here is I want to make you, or actually show you how to develop for web, not like an accountant at least. Okay, so speaking about practices that don't work, one that absolutely does not work is trying to do 36 demos in one session. So I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit, but let's see how far we will actually succeed. So building control-ins is easy in AL. Have you tried that? Let me see. So perfect, because you have an amazing all-in-one environment where you can do just about everything. You define what you used to define as interface earlier in .NET, you define the manifest that you would normally develop in XML, then you put it all together, you put stuff anywhere you want, you have a free folder structure, you have the language that you know, the type system that you know, and everything is beautiful. So let's take a look at an amazingly simple control-in that I have developed for this particular occasion. I have too many windows open. I hope you don't mind if I close down a few of them, so it will just be simpler for me to navigate through this mess of everything. So VS Code, yeah, I will actually switch this. I actually prefer dark theme. I'm on the dark side, of the force. So this is a very simple control-in. So it doesn't do anything. I call it simpler payment registration. So if you've ever done payment registration during your journal posting career, then you might know that it's not the most user-friendly piece of functionality in there. So I decided to simplify it a little bit. I have a page that invokes a code unit, and that code unit prepares some data, pushes that data into the control-in, which has, actually this is the script. This is just some dependency that I have to nicely format numbers. This is my script, so let's take a look at this script. This simpler script is, it does everything. It builds the control-in interface. It handles the state. It handles calculations. It handles HTML, events, state, absolutely everything. So all is in one place. And when I run that, since everything is so simple, it will get published. Oh, I need to sign in. Who would say? And there it is. So this is my simpler payment management. I can go here, I can click around, and then I can select stuff in various currencies, and then when I'm done, I click post, and then I'm done. So that was simple, right? And it was easy, but yeah, this really doesn't work. Easy is tricky. Because you might like this, like it's all nice, easy, simple in one single place. We can do a lot of things with that, but there are a lot of problems with it. The first problem that I find with it is what all web developers call global scope pollution. We're just putting everything in one script which runs in global scope, so it's a mess that we can break by introducing any other script, or we can easily break any other script we introduce because we're just not paying attention. That's something that we all often fall victims of. The second problem that we have is performance. It might not be immediately obvious, but it does not render too fast, because I'm really rendering everything procedurally. I'm re-rendering entire interface every single time. There is the smallest change, it just goes and re-renders everything. This might look amazing on your newest i9 ninth generation processor, but when you have like some small machine at the customer's office, then maybe it's not going to work that nice. The other problem that we have is debugging. If you have tried debugging this stuff, then, well, most likely you have been doing it using the browser debugger tools, which are not the friendliest, especially if you like F5 to continue, and then you are in Chrome, and you press F5, and it reloads everything. Yeah, so we'll see what we can do about that as well. And there is also browser compatibility issue. If I try to load this, and I will have to say trust me this time, trust me doesn't work in Internet Explorer. It just doesn't, because it's not compatible with it. There are issues, it will break, it will not work. And you know, this picture, if it's not obvious why it's there, it's because of this. The picture was taken this morning in the speaker's room. The other problem we have is also it's separation of concerns. There is absolutely none. This is not a picture from the speaker's room this morning. This is Waldo's garage. No, it's not. So these are the problems that we will try to solve in this session. So we will try to find a better way to do all of those things. Another practice that does not work is developing in one file. So I have one nice JavaScript file, which is one big fat spaghetti monster, which is just going to be more difficult to untangle the more we go. So something that's good for browser, which is this, is not good for you. So you have to try to not have 30,000 lines in one file. We will address this issue a little bit later. So actually, you know, we can do much better. So let's do better. The next thing that I will do is I'm going to address the fact that this is all one file, because that's a bad practice. So web developers don't develop in one file. Imagine you putting all your AL objects just in one file. That's pretty much the same thing. So you don't do that. And what I've done here, I have split it up. So I have a number of files. I have my start script. I did have that one earlier, so it's nothing new in here. I have this constant script, which just has constants, and if I need more, I will just put them there. Then I have this UI script, which is in charge of building UI, and it's in essence just DOM manipulation code. Then I have this interface script, state script, which is handling state, but it's not the most beautiful script ever. You know, see, this is not just handling state, it's handling events, it's handling also a little bit of DOM, and kind of I wasn't sure what to do with that one, so how to properly handle it. And then I have interface, which is, you know, also not the cleanest one. So I'm sending data from Business Central, or actually this is where I receive data and then I send the data to control it, and it's also, you know, I'm not too happy with it. It doesn't belong there, but I wasn't sure where does it belong. Should I put it in a separate file, in UI file, in state file? Yeah. So yes, it works. It's exactly the same, so I'm not going to run this demo. Trust me, it works. It's exactly the same stuff, just split up a little bit more so that we can manage our development better. And then our control-it-in is looking like this. I've declared every single control-it-in in there, script file in there, but there is a big problem with this. If I continue doing like that, then, you know, at some point I will have 150 scripts, and then, you know, I will have 150 declarations out there, and that's not going to work. You know, I have to handle that somewhat better. But, you know, the first thing that I want to address is I want to address this fact that I have this thing here, and I have also that thing here. And also if I look at UI, oh my God, like, do you really handle UI like that when you're developing for web? Normally not. Normally you're using a framework. So let's try to improve this. Let's actually go to another branch, which I called framework. And here I have this, everything is the same, except I have this extra file, which I call framework. So let's take a look at what I have inside. So I don't know if you can read this, but if you cannot, then it says, the last thing the world needs at this point is another JavaScript framework from you. So, and let's actually stop for a second here, and let's talk about frameworks. JavaScript is notorious about frameworks because all the time new frameworks arrive. And you know, there is so many front-end frameworks. They're popping up like mushrooms. And it's very difficult to choose which one to go for. And you know, the problem is not that there are so many frameworks. It's why are they coming and what problems they are trying to solve. You know, 12 years ago, everybody was doing everything with jQuery. I'm pretty sure half of you here are using jQuery on a daily basis when you're developing, if you're developing controllers. But then newer frameworks have come because they wanted to solve issues that jQuery introduced, and they introduced some more problems, and then some other frameworks came that solved those problems and then introduced some other. And yes, frameworks happen so often in JavaScript world that there is even a website, a funny website, like just mocking all that, which is called days since last JavaScript framework.com. And you know, it just shows you this number. So since I started talking about frameworks, there have been probably 3 new somewhere on GitHub. So one thing that does not work, one practice that I please ask you do not develop another one, because you will quickly figure out that it wasn't the smartest investment that you could have possibly done. So we will not be doing a new framework. And let's actually forget about framework for a while. Let's talk bundles. So I started talking about how bad it is to have one big fat script like 30,000 lines. But that's actually what we want to have in the end. The thing is, when you're developing in AL, when compiler compiles everything, it puts everything in one object. You know, it compiles stuff. Like when you write in C#, it compiles everything in one DLL, not 75,000 DLLs if you have 75,000 files. And the same we want to have with JavaScript. When we develop, we want to be able to write in separate files because we want to separate concerns, separate topics and everything, areas. But once we want to deploy that to browsers, we want to bundle that together. So it's actually a good thing to have everything in one file. It's just bad to develop in that one file. JavaScript bundles are a good thing. So they group separate files together. They are actually improving performance in the browser. They also reduce HTTP traffic. And it is actually your goal to end up having a bundle. It makes things more difficult for you in a certain way, but it's actually very good. And let's take a look how we can do bundles. Let me introduce our first tool in our toolkit today, which is called gulp. What is gulp? Gulp is, well, they call themselves the streaming build system. So, well, let's not try to explain what exactly that means. Their primary task is to enable us to bundle files. That's #1 thing that gulp does. And it, in fact, is a task system. It allows you to write custom tasks which automate things like, and those things are typically shuffling files, like reading some bunch of files, doing something to those files, and then spitting them out as either a bundle or some other files. So that's what gulp does. And beautiful thing about gulp is that it taps beautifully into Visual Studio Code. So let's take a look at that. I will open my first gulp branch, which is called gulp hello world. Yes, framework is deleted. I don't need that one. But what I need is this gulp file. I will not show you how to install gulp. Well, you have instructions on gulp website. All installations here are npm install, then the name of the add-in that you install, and then save or save dev. In this case, it's save dev. Anyway, I'm not going to show those things. I'm just going to show you what gulp does and how it works. So this is a gulp file. Gulp file is necessary because gulp uses gulp file when it needs to do automations. And when you have a gulp file, something like this, then you can use gulp to automate. And how can we automate? Well, we can always go to the terminal. We can say gulp tasks, and see which tasks are available, we see that hello task is available, which means we could also say gulp hello, and then it will run the hello world task, and it will print this hello world on screen. Another thing we can do with tasks is we can go to the command palette, and we can say run task, and then we can choose gulp hello, because Visual Studio Code recognizes that there is a task in the gulp system, and we can run that task. Let's for now forget about that. So I'm going to continue without scanning the task output. That's if you have some linters, it can be useful, but since I'm not using any right now, I'm not using that either. So here, VS Code has just executed my gulp task to automate this hello world. So doesn't look too useful yet, but let's take a look at what else can we do with gulp. So in fact, before I get to show, what can it be used for? Well, just about anything. There are more than 12,000 plugins for actually gulp-related downloads or packages on NPM, more than 4,000 gulp plugins. Also, you can use it for bundling, for automating, transpilation, for example, minification, beautification, uglification, whatever they want to call themselves these days. You can lint, you can annotate, you can document, you can anything, zip, ship, anything. So let's try to make something useful with gulp. So I'm here going to skip a few demos out of those 36, so 2 down. And I'm going to jump into this gulp debug. So my gulp file is, it has grown. And let's start by saying gulp, just gulp tasks to see what I have. Yeah, enter. That's good to press occasionally. So I have 2 top-level tasks. One of them is called build, one of them is called watch. So the build task is also, as you can see, a hierarchy of tasks, which does a lot of smaller things. So let's take a look at what I do inside build task. I build JavaScript, I build CSS. Both are actually split up. So I have like nice split up system. I'm also inside this bundle.js, I'm reading all JavaScript files except for start.js file, which I don't want in the bundle. Then I'm initializing source maps. That's another plugin. We will see what that is for. Then I am concatenating all files into a single file, which is bundle.js file name. It's going to be this simpler min.js. Then I'm uglifying that. Uglification or minification or whatever you want to call is the process of reducing the size of your file by changing the variable names to the shortest ones possible, and also by removing any unnecessary syntax constructs, and also simplifying syntax constructs so they take the least amount possible. And then we write the source map, and then we write the file itself. So this is what my build.js does. And if I run gulp build, it will build my simpler min.js. Yep, Git has detected that there is a change. I can take a look at this. So it has really uglified my JavaScript code. It doesn't look anything like my original code. It has code up there, and it has a source map down there. What is a source map? Well, it's a nice tool that allows me to debug my code, my JavaScript code, regardless of where it comes from which file, and regardless of how it looks in the end in this uglified bundle file, I can still debug it using Visual Studio Code. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. At this stage, I'm going to first run this. So I'm running this project. It's deploying it to Business Central. I can, I will close this one. And then I'm going to set a breakpoint in my state script here, entry clicked. You can see that it's actually red. Sorry, I apologize. Yes. No. I would have to say, trust me, it works, and then you would laugh, and I don't want to afford you that pleasure. So I'm going to launch Chrome. We will address this a little bit later. So I'm launching Chrome because I'm now going to use this session to debug my Business Central. So I'm again inside here. And yes, I can see that this is still red, which means if I click here, my debugger kicks in. regardless of the fact that, you know, it's somewhere very, very ugly in that uglified, minified single bundle file. My source map tells my debugger where exactly to look for the source line of whatever line it's currently executing. That's beautiful. So this is, for example, something that gulp can do for you. Another very nice thing that gulp can do for you is that it can watch. So I have this gulp watch task, so I can say gulp watch. And then it starts watching the changes. So if I do something like alert clicked, what do I know? Save, you see? It bundled up everything together. So when I deploy this now to Business Central, I don't need to do anything. It's just, yeah, it's just there. So I don't have to do any manual deployment, zipping, or whatever. So all of that is fully automated by gulp. So this is what gulp can do for us. Pretty, pretty cool. I would like to introduce another tool. Now that we've seen gulp, which is the first toolkit that you will probably want to introduce into your toolkit, the second one is called Babel. What is Babel? Well, Babel says for them this. Babel is a JavaScript compiler. Wow. So yes, every browser has a JavaScript compiler. All JavaScript code ever is compiled inside browsers. So why do we need JavaScript compiler? Well, let me show you. So I'll go into JS Fiddle. I don't know if you know JS Fiddle. You can play with JavaScript here, see if something works. Like, for example, you can say alert hello or what, blah. I'm doing typos. You run that, it shows you, when you execute, it shows you the output. So imagine that you go on, let's say, Stack Overflow and find a nice chunk of code that you just want to make work for yourself. And then you copy that into Stack Overflow, into JS Fiddle, and then you want to try to make it work. And then you run it, and then it doesn't work. So why doesn't it work? Can you read this even? So, yeah. So it's, you know, for me, it's very difficult to figure out why does not this work, because it, you know, it looks like perfectly valid piece of JavaScript code to me. So what's the problem? And then I realized, oh, this is Edge. It might be that it's not fully browser compatible. So let's copy that and paste it into Chrome. Actually, this is Edge, just Chrome acting as Edge. So I run it in a more modern browser, and I run this, and it tells me, oh, Vjeko is the best. Cool. So where is the problem? Well, I'm using a few syntactical elements here which are not known to Edge, or, God forbid, Internet Explorer, whoever uses it still. So I'm going to copy this and take it over to Babel, the JavaScript compiler, for compilation. And then I'm going to try it out. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to wait. How's life? Ah, it's awake. I'm going to paste this here. And when Babel compiles this, it actually didn't run that code. It ran the code on the right side. So it's this. So see, this is browser compatible code for this here. So you know, JavaScript is a little bit like your wife. When she tells you this, what she really means is that stuff over there. I'll have to try Babel next time at home. So let's actually see if this does work. So I'm going to copy this over into Edge, and I'm going to run this now and see if this really is working. So yes, Vjeko is the best. Of course he is, because he only needs, you know, one line to write all that junk. So back to our original code. If you followed what I was typing, you might wonder what happened to Waldo in this line. So let's see what happened to Waldo. So I'm going to remove this part, and I'm going to inspect what happened to Waldo. So Waldo, and then I run that. Waldo who? Okay, well, come to my and Waldo session tomorrow. We are at far better terms than my session would make you believe. So, Babel. Babel is a JavaScript compiler. It makes your funny space Star Wars level Jedi JavaScript, it turns it into something that common browsers can execute and process. It transpiles the syntax into the common syntax, and you can choose what common syntax means. You can choose the browser target that you want to target. You can choose a lot of options. It also polyfills missing features. So if you're using a functionality such as, let's say, promises that all the browsers do not know about, then it will polyfill them so that you can use promises. So overall, it will turn any JavaScript code into JavaScript code that runs without issues. It will optimize code. It will do more. And of course, you can integrate Babel with gulp. So let's do that. At this stage, I'm actually going to run Internet Explorer. And I'm going to run, I'm not going to run anything yet. I'm going to first run my simpler demo. So when I get in, I'm copying the URL, I'm pasting that to Internet Explorer. And when I sign in, nothing happens because it cannot. Because if I look in the console, it's full of red stuff. Because, yeah, it's full of syntax that Internet Explorer just cannot process. Good. Let's put Babel to work here. So I'm going to remove all things that I changed. And I'm going to go into my Babel demo. And the only thing that has changed here is that in my gulp file, I now have Babel plugin. And I put this Babel plugin to work just after concatenating all the files and just before uglifying. So my Babel will take care of transpiling all my code into something that will work in all browsers, and then uglification will make it small as possible. And when I run this, this is now Chrome, and or actually Edge acting as Chrome, or Chrome acting as Edge, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to Internet Explorer, pasting the URL again, and trust me, it works stuff, or let's take a look. Yeah, it might be that I didn't run gulp, that's true. So in any case, let's close this and let's go back. I will just save a script file because my watch task should be running. Internet Explorer is playful. So yes, it's now bundling. And now I'm going to run it again. And let's try. No. What's going on? This Explorer is just, it's not doing anything, in fact. I'm not sure it's even gulp, it's that it's blocked, so it's not responding to things. And yeah, it's not there. I will just, once more, I will just try to manually build because it might be that something is wrong with this. I will stop everything and I'm going to do gulp build. Because I didn't close, I should close and restart because I have watch configured as a startup task so that it starts up automatically. Who knows, maybe things have gone wrong. I'm just going to run once again before I fall back to trust me it works, because it does work. Yeah. You know me, it's now a tradition. So I'm going to retry Internet Explorer. There. So, yeah, thank you. So, this is what gulp can do for you. Well, I don't know why you would want to care about Internet Explorer in the first place. There is still 0.0 something people in the world who are using it. So, yeah, why actually annoy them? So, by the way, all Business Central, Dynamics NAV users who are using the old version of the universal client actually use Internet Explorer. Another reason why you might want to care about Internet Explorer is that the Windows client, for those who still use it, when they embed a web controller in, they also use Internet Explorer. So it might be worthwhile to tap Babel into your toolchain to actually let it take care of these things. So this is what Babel does. It's a pretty amazing piece of tool. What else can gulp do? For example, for us in the AL world, well, things that I have put it to use is when I'm building controller-ins for earlier versions of NAV, and well, it's stupid to say like earlier versions of Business Central because I'm talking about NAV. So, of course, I do bundle, I zip controller-in files, I'm deploying stuff through PowerShell, like when you're developing controller-ins, you have to do all these acrobatics with zipping files, creating controller-in records, uploading the resource file, etc. So I automate all that through gulp. I just press F5 in VS Code and it ships everything through gulp into Business Central, Dynamics NAV. Also, it can build documentation, for example, from your AL source files. It can extract the controller-in resource file from the app file, like I build it for Business Central, then extract and reuse for Dynamics NAV. And probably, a lot more, but you got the idea. And unfortunately, the story about gulp and AL and stuff, it stops here. Because the more astute from you might have noticed that when I'm using gulp, actually, yeah, I will just have to, restart my VS Code. You might have noticed this folder, node modules. Who knows what node modules is? Good. So, do you think it belongs here? Well, Microsoft also agrees with you. So that folder does not belong there. Why is that? What is node modules? Well, when you install gulp, Babel, anything, npm, which is the node system package manager, something like NuGet for JavaScript, and Visual Studio Code is Node. It's running on Node.js. So when you install an npm package, the node modules folder gets generated for you. And it contains dependencies. Dependencies that you will use either for development, like gulp here, or dependencies that you will use for runtime, as we will probably want to do a little bit later when we take it to an even higher level. So the problem with node modules is that it now sits right in the middle of our AL workspace. And if you don't know it, you should. When you compile AL, what happens? Well, AL compiler looks through every single file in there to see if it's an AL file, and then it compiles that file. And it will look through your node modules folder and try to find any AL files in there, and it shouldn't be doing that. So if I actually take an example where is it? Here. I have installed some funky npm module, and if I try to package that, I will see that it fails. So compilation started, and then it will start showing me these errors. Because there are AL files out there somewhere deep in node modules hierarchy, which are, guess what, not AL files. They are some binary files containing audio. And yes, that will not be compiled. So that's the end of the road for us in AL, trying to integrate all these funky, beautiful tools into our workspaces. So what do we do? Well, first, one of the practices that does not work is to keep Node.js inside AL workspace. Unfortunately, in my opinion, Microsoft should have done a better job at making AL play nicely with the environment in which it lives, which is Node.js environment. It actually just completely ignores that fact. And we have to live with that. Maybe they fix it at some point, but until they do, we have to actually use multi-root workspaces. And I don't know if you tried multi-root workspaces. I'm just going to show you how to actually use them. Multi-root workspaces are a feature of VS Code that allows you to have multiple workspaces loaded at the same time. So they can belong in the same subfolder, or they can be from multiple different subfolders, is up to you. But if you put like one parent folder and then all related workspaces as subfolders of that, and then you Git init in the parent folder, you will have a very beautiful Git controlled master workspace which controls all of your interdependent workspaces. Like in our case, maybe we can put AL in one and gulp and all automation tasks or all web control add-in development tasks into the other workspaces. So let's take a look at that. This will be a quick demo. I will not run anything, so I'll just open this split up simpler workspace where I have AL in here, web in there, and you know, this is where gulp lives with node modules and all. This is where AL lives without node modules or any pollution from the tools that it doesn't play nicely with. And you know, all of my tasks are configured here. So all of automation is configured here. When I save a file, the watch task will bundle it. It will actually ship files across into the AL folder. So I can check that. I can first make sure that watch task is running. It's not because I didn't restart the entire VS Code. I will just do gulp. Sorry, not from this folder. This is AL folder. And then I will go into web, and I will do gulp watch. So this will run the watch task. And then if I just go here and just change a line of code, you will see that it has actually updated two files. So one file is out there, and and this file simpler min is in my AL workspace. So this is now beautiful because AL is concerned with AL, gulp is, and you know, you as a controlled in developer in web department are concerned with something else, and it all plays nicely together. Not because AL still doesn't live nicely with multi-root workspaces. There are a number of things that AL does, like for example, it hijacks F5. And one of the beautiful things with multi-root workspaces is that you can create compound debug configurations, where you could say, when I press F5, I want to launch, like I want to launch webpack here with Node.js web server, and I want to launch a Chrome debugger on top of that, and I also want to launch the attach to next process configuration of AL, and then all three come up together and each debugger is attached to whatever. That's not, unfortunately, possible in VS Code at this point. I tried crazy things to try to make it work, to present it here. It would be really cool, but you cannot do that. That's why I will, for this session, and until this gets fixed, I will have to actually always run AL and then run Chrome as a parallel debugging session when I want to debug web stuff or control it in stuff. That's how it is. And maybe that gets fixed, maybe not, we will see. Also, AL will put some AL artifacts into other workspaces, like for example, this rad.json. It will always get injected if you accidentally press or invoke any or try to access any AL feature from within your workspace, web workspace, which is going to be difficult not to. Like for example, you will accidentally press F5, and there you go. AL will immediately try to run your web workspace and will fail. It will put rad.json in there. So yeah, you need to take care of that. You get used to that, and then that's it. Good. Remember frameworks? This jungle of different frameworks that I said, like, let's talk about them later. There is vast ocean of these things, and I've put the reason why I don't have more here is that, you know, there is no more room. Also, I needed to get ready for the session. Otherwise, I would have to spend like entire career putting logos of some obscure frameworks out there. However, in that jungle of frameworks, 3 frameworks have kind of bubbled up as the leaders. I call them big 3. It's not only me who calls them the big 3. And what are the big 3? The first one is Angular. When it appeared first, it called themselves super heroic JavaScript model view whatever framework. It's from Google, and it's funny. Google did it on TypeScript, which is Microsoft's, back at time when Steve Ballmer was like the chief Google hater officer of Microsoft, and they were really fighting each other. So that was a very, very nice symbiosis of Google and Microsoft technologies. So that's Angular. It has advanced quite a lot since then, and it's one of top frameworks these days. The next one that appeared like 3 years after was React. by Facebook. So they have first developed their own user interface, then they released it into open source, and now it's one of the most popular frameworks. They are pretty unpretentious. They say about themselves, a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces, full stop. So they are not super heroic or something like that. And then finally, a curious one happened by a single developer called Ivan Yu, which is called Vue, which is just, popped out of the blue like in early 2015 and just gained quite some traction and is extremely popular these days. I know that here in this audience there are people who are using Vue, right? Okay, good. So it's something that disproves my point when I said, like, don't build another framework, you. Actually, that guy did, and he succeeded. But it's, 1 in a million. Good. Let's talk about these frameworks. What do they have in common? The first thing that these frameworks have in common is if you want to use the full power of them, you cannot just write something in them and then put that into a browser and then, expect that it will run. It will not. So all of them will require some kind of pre-processing, transpilation, Babeling, whatever you want to call it, that will translate that framework into usable JavaScript code. So we will have to use some kind of tool chain to translate whichever one you choose into something that you can actually use inside the browser. They all have huge developer base, which means there is a vast knowledge base out there. When you Google or Bing, I don't know if you Bing, any question, or if you look at Stack Overflow or anywhere, there will be ton and ton of stuff, ton of issues and solutions. And they all have great support in VS Code. Actually, VS Code is #1 development environment for all three. So it just took over web development world, just as it did Business Central or NAV development world. Also, there is a difficult question, which one to choose? Because, if you choose a wrong framework, you will suffer from it ever after. And then refactoring between different frameworks is not just about changing user interface, because you also make data and model and different kinds of choices, architectural choices around the framework that you choose. So which one should you go for? Well, all three will work with Business Central. In fact, every single framework you can make work with Business Central. There is none that you cannot, at least with Gulp or with Babel or with other tools which are available, and you will see some of them. You can take any framework out there and make it work. So that's not a question. All will work. I would say choose whichever one suits your development style. But also take a look at numbers. If you take a look at Stack Overflow, they did this most loved, most dreaded, and most wanted framework survey. And React is #1 with 74% of web developers actually loving React. Angular is somewhat low at 50%. Like people who are using it, like half of them like it. The other half is kind of, just like Seaside, probably. About dreaded, well, Angular leads. It's the most dreaded framework. Like people who are using it, they mostly are afraid. They're scared shitless of it. Whereas, React, nearly nobody is scared. So this is what is on the dreaded end. Wanted end is, of course, React is, again, the first one. And then it's Vue, and then it's Angular. So that's what Stack Overflow says. Google says a different story. So Google says that React is the most commonly searched term, then it's followed by Angular, and then followed by Vue. And if you want statistics of how often they are used, well, you look at NPM, which is the site that ships them as dependency. Then React is really on the top, and it's gaining traction. It's actually coming up, whereas these two are kind of, honestly, I don't expect Vue to win. It's popular, it's nice, and all, but yeah. Which one did I choose? Well, obviously not Vue. Vue is beautiful, by the way, but I don't quite like it. And so which one did I choose, and why did I choose it? Well, I choose React. And let's take a look at why I choose React. Well, React is very straightforward, very simple. It is also not template or, it's not template based, which means it doesn't have some declarative syntax to build user interface. If you take a look at Business Central and Seaside if you want, building page object is declarative. It's template based. You can do those 7 kinds of controls that you can do and nothing else. That's why we are here sitting in this session, because we want to do something else with user interface. Declarative languages tell you this is the framework, you can use that framework and nothing else is possible. Sorry, next version. Go there and make a Git issue if you want. React says nothing like that. They have their language and this is fully under control of JavaScript. You can run whatever you want, you can build whatever you want. Very, very simple. It's imperative as opposed to declarative, and it makes it really easy to use. You will see quickly about it. It's also very flexible about architecture. It's completely unopinionated about a lot of things, nearly about every single thing. It lets you choose whatever way of doing work you prefer. And it also, in my experience, fits best with how AL and JavaScript work together. And of course, numbers do matter. When I have a problem, React something, problem, enter, and I get a solution nearly instantly. Whereas, with others, it's numbers tell me that I would expect to get less of that. How do we get started with React? Obviously, you cannot just start, Notepad, start writing React, because you need to have a tool chain configured. There are a number of available options, like, for example, if you've ever built an extension for VS Code. I know that at least 1 or 2 people in the audience have built, sitting over there, maybe some are sitting out there. You have used Yauman, which is, building up, project structure, creating like startup points with putting boilerplate code together and stuff like that. There is React app, which is also a command line interface utility which can help get you started. There is this manually from scratch kind of guide, which I actually prefer. I prefer doing it from scratch because it only takes 2 minutes. It's very easy and it gives me complete control over everything. And it doesn't push any decision on me. It doesn't choose which package manager should I use. It doesn't choose for me what version of what dependency I want to use. It doesn't tell me which test framework I want to use, etc. So I just start off from scratch and can do anything I want. Also, it gives me minimum dependencies installed, which means it will keep my bundle files smaller. Good. The first thing that you will set up when doing this from manual workflow, or which any of those automated code builders will do for you, is install Webpack. So what is Webpack? Webpack is a static module bundler, and it's very, very, very different than Gulp. So Gulp is also a module bundler, but Gulp is kind of stupid about it. It takes your files, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it glues them all together, churns out this bundle file, and there you go. Webpack is a little bit smarter about that. So it will still generate the bundle file, but it will do a lot of optimizations. And it's also heavily configurable. You have a lot of different plugins that you can tap into that process, which will make that optimization even better. The number one optimization that Webpack will do is on this output bundle, that it will make sure that this output bundle contains only what it needs to contain. And it will do that by building a dependency graph. And then when it has this dependency graph, it will do an optimization which it calls treeshaking. I will show what that is. And then it will come up with something that is very small and contains just what you need it to contain. And it's not only limited to JavaScript, it will do that the same for style sheets, for images, and any other kinds of assets. So what is this treeshaking optimization? Well, every Webpack bundle starts with one entry point. That's one module, one file, which says, okay, start here. And then this module probably depends on 2 other modules. And this module B depends on 2 other, and D depends on these 2, and E depends on this one, C depends on E and F depends on only J. So this is like an example of a tree that has been built after Webpack started optimizing. And then it runs dead code detection, which goes through the code and tries to see which top-level function from which module is or is not used. And when it detects that, it will actually mark those. And when it marks those, these are dead branches. It shakes the tree, those fall off, and what remains is the bundle, which is optimal size, contains only what it needs to contain, and will guarantee to be the smallest possible, and will cause least amount of traffic or complications for the browser. When you have NPM managing your modules and dependencies, this is important, because those modules, when you install whichever module you want, they will install thousands of others, and that happens constantly. So you really need a good optimizer to make sure that you only use stuff that is necessary. Good. Webpack with React works pretty nicely. React uses a specific JavaScript dialect called JSX. This JSX looks, at first view, it actually looks very ugly because it's mixing up JavaScript and HTML. And you don't really see the boundary between the two. It looks really kind of a mishmash of those things. Well, Webpack uses Babel to transpile this JSX into actual JavaScript code. And then it includes all dependencies, and it results in a single bundle file. So let's actually try to see a React Hello World example. This is an example of a component which just prints Hello World on screen. And let's take a look at that in practice. So I'm going to open another workspace. So here is my React control or component which just results in Hello World. I will run that. Oops. Yeah, I didn't start Webpack because my browser was, my VS Code was running already. So we'll run it again. Let me take a look if it's not running, so I'll run it manually. I normally configure my workspaces to do this automatically on open folder. And most of them are like this. I don't know why this branch isn't. So now it's running. I will run it in Chrome. And here I go with my Hello World. So as you can see, this is just a typical JavaScript class. It has a random method. It uses return syntax, and then it returns a chunk of HTML. So this is what JSX is. It simply, this HTML gets translated into JavaScript object representation. And then if I want to use this app, I can use it like this. I simply return the app tag. This is how React does that. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Even though at first it may look a little bit ugly and unmanageable, it is absolutely not. Let's try to do this simpler in React. So we want first to start by creating necessary components. So we will have one data container, one summary container. Data container will have data entries. This will have summary details, which will have summary entries. On top of that, I will have a view, which controls all of that. And then when I see this as a tree structure, this is what I have. View contains these two, those two contain something else, and it is a nice hierarchy. On top of that, I'm going to add data. So my data that comes from Business Central as a JSON array will just be fed to Vue. Vue will distribute that as properties onto the data container. Data container will distribute that as properties onto individual data entries. On the right-hand side, where I have summaries, I have those question marks because I don't know yet exactly what that will be. I will get to that point a little bit later. Something else that I will do is when I click this data entry, I want it to turn teal. So when I click it, it will turn teal. That is something that is managed through state, as we will see. So this is the first step of my state management, where I will actually turn the color. And the second one is I will actually notify the Vue that I've now selected this, and Vue will distribute information to the right-hand side, where it will feed information about selected entries, and then summary container will actually take care of that. So this is the simplest possible structure in React. I'm just going to show the structure. I'm not going to run that. So what I have here is this simpler with data in React, where I have these components. I have my data container, which is this JSX file. I have my data entry, which is this JSX file. You can see it is mostly writing HTML and then just doing some data binding, which is not in fact data binding. It looks like template language from Vue or from Angular, but it is not. This is actually just writing out an actual value of a JavaScript value. So this curly braces in React doesn't mean like template syntax for variables. It's actually just saying from now on, just do JavaScript that's inside. I can write functions. I can call interesting array functions from there, anything at all. So this is my basic structure. My Vue component that I have here will receive data as a property. So that data will come into the Vue component. Vue will then assign that data to my data container. My data container will read that data. It will use data map to actually run for each, and then create a data entry component of each data entry. That's how simple that is in React. And you know, when you get used, it's pretty readable and much, much better than where we started off, like at the beginning of this session. One more thing that I want to do is when I'm developing in React, I do not want to have any extra steps when I want to make this component available to Business Central. What I want to do, I apologize. They normally serve water here, and I'm now out of water, so yeah. Anyway, what I want to do is, throw me a bottle. I will throw a mic at you later on. So, thank you very much. Thanks. Apologize for this, but. Yeah. Thanks. So, I want to make sure that every code I write will run in my development environment right now in my Chrome. But when I just gulp it over to Business Central, I want it to just run there without me having to do anything to it. I'm going to build this bundle, and this bundle has to work from Business Central without me having to do absolutely anything as compared to what I'm now developing in my web workspace. So that is something I'm going to show you. So I have a very, 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 very simple, AL mock system where my view is still apologize. It is still receiving some properties. However, what it does is it changes properties to state. We will see soon about state, what that is. And then it makes sure that, in essence, yeah, I have more components here. I don't want to go into deep details about all of these. I will blog about all of these. This is now ready. I just need to push it out. The rendering part is exactly as it was. What is the important part here is if I want to take a look at my app, it is now running Vue without setting properties. As you can see, it's not setting data property anymore on my Vue. So my Vue is completely detached from data. It is just a holder for other components. And my data is actually, if I look at my index, it's also not just running this React render. It is actually, I exposed a global function called initialize React, which I run from my startup script. And my startup script is not in my folder here. My startup script is in my control.in folder there, in my Node.js website where I simulate everything. So this start script is the same start script that I will use inside my control.in. And I have a mock piece of code where I'm mocking a current page. So this is just, it is the simplest way possible. I have this simpler send data, which is exactly what I would write in C#, AL, curpage.simpler.send data, and then I'm passing this data, which is now a JSON file containing all that data. So it's here. So this is my JSON data. Also, I have Microsoft Dynamics NAV mock, which is mocking the framework, where I have invoke extensibility method, where I have this onControlReady method. I'm notifying my AL that front end is now ready for communication, and then back end will call this current page simpler send data to send this chunk of JSON. So when I build all that, when I actually run gulp build, oops, yeah, I'm in the wrong folder. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't have NAV yet. Sorry, Business Central. I will get there. I forgot. So I apologize. I don't have any Business Central. But if I just put Business Central and I build this bundle over there and start sending files, it will just work. And if I run this, you know, whoever is developing this now, whatever they do will just work with Business Central. Yeah, I've stopped my Node web server. So now if I run, it's happening as if this was run from a controlled-in environment inside Business Central. So I can still click and it still works exactly the same. Except that I don't have to change anything. I have a bundle file which I simply copy over. I can do it manually if I want. Just copy it over to Business Central, control it in development workspace, and it will work. We will see that a little bit later when I put these things all together. So yes, we can make React work with Business Central very easily. There are no problems. We will use Webpack for that. We will use all the tools that we have seen so far. Now, having seen React, you may ask yourself, what architecture is React? Because, you know, we suffer from patterns and architectures and those, you know, is it MVC, is it MVP, is it MVVM? You know, all of these I've heard these days here at Tech Days. Is it also maybe model view, whatever? React does not care. So React used to say, React is V in MVC. So it actually lets you choose. So React can be put to work with any kind of architecture, but you know, it will be very difficult to draw lines to say like, okay, this is model, this is view, this is controller, etc. It's just not possible with React. It has its own architectural approach, and in React it all starts with state. State is at heart of it. So here we will, actually I clicked too fast. I want to start showing you what state is in React. So I'm going to open another folder. Pretty sure it's this one. Nope. Apologize. Yep. It's this one. So I'm going to collapse all unnecessary stuff. I have even AL here. Yep. So let me run this workspace and let's see what we have. Oh, we still have this. Must have selected the wrong workspace. Well, yeah, this is the one. Sorry. I have a simple counter component. What I want to do is when I click plus and when I click minus, I want up this counter to go up or down. The problem is that I have actually done it in a very, very amateurish way. If I take a look at my counter component, yep, it returns the counter value, and it has this on-click event where it increases this counter or decreases this counter. So I have state in my component. This state contains one single property, which is called counter, and then I expect when I click plus or minus that it will just go up or down magically. Well, it will not. The reason why it will not is because React doesn't do what Vue or Angular do. It does not bind directly to state. It actually detaches the state and the view part completely, and it has different ways of accessing that. So the first thing that we have learned is that, yeah, this state object contains component state. And also we have learned that we cannot manipulate that state directly. By assigning values there directly, we do not achieve anything. So let's try to make it better. So I'm going to show you that, in fact, that statement wasn't completely true. I still have the same stuff here. I still have this state. I still have this plus, plus, minus, minus. But I have another thing. Every 5 seconds, I'm going to refresh my view. So I can go here, and I can start pressing plus C. And now it will refresh, and it will be this. And then I will go and click it more, see if I can get it below 0. And yes, I succeeded. Good. So what we learned so far is that we should not manipulate state directly because we can hit unexpected results. So what should we do then? Well, let's fix this once for all and let's make it the way it should be done in React. So in React, there is this function this.setState where I'm saying which part of state I'm modifying. And then when I modify that part of state, React runtime will make sure to update that part of user interface which is bound to that state. So since this component is bound to this state, it will be refreshed entirely. So when I now start clicking this plus or minus, it actually executes that at that moment. So it refreshes automatically. So what we have learned is that we should manipulate state through this setState method. However, this is not the cleanest stuff possible. Let's improve this architecture. So let's get it to a more correct state. So instead of me just doing like increasing by 1 or decreasing by 1, I have created a method called increase, which receives a number, and then if number is 0, it doesn't do anything, and if number is not 0, then it actually increases by that number. And then, of course, if I run that, it will do the same. You might have noticed that I don't have to refresh anything. Webpack does that for me automatically. So as soon as I save something, Webpack rebuilds everything and refreshes it automatically in the browser. It's called hot loading. So I don't really have to change a single thing while developing in React. That is also true of Vue and Angular if you want. So, but this is not good yet. So what I dislike is that I can pass 5 to this, and maybe that's not good according to my business logic rules. So what I want to do is I want to do it even more correct way. So I create a method called increase, which accepts no parameters, and decrease, which receives no parameters. So I can only go up by 1 or down by 1. And then when I click 1, plus I get increase. When I click down, I get decrease. And now I have these methods taking care of specific business rules, which is increase by 1, decrease by 1. So when I run this, I still have the same result, but I have a much better architecture. So what we have learned is that React refreshes UI automatically on state change, and that it's good to manipulate state through dedicated methods. The methods which are designed to perform a very specific, well-defined state change. Good. But what do we have at this point? We have a all-in-one component where we could say model is state. We could say view is this JSX, and we could say controller is these, on-click logic and, these 2 functions that I've created. But it's not the best. Can we do better? Well, yes, we can. So let's try to separate the concerns here. Let's try to move the state out of this component, and let's try to move the controller out of that component. And here we get the help from Redux. Have you heard of Redux? Have you used Redux? Well, everybody who has heard and is not using Redux, shame on you, because it's the most beautiful framework ever. So what is Redux? They say that they are a predictable state container for JavaScript apps. And what does that mean? Well, here's the link. It's the library for managing application state. It's extremely popular. It has a ton of plugins. I don't know why 12,000 is kind of a magic number for everything JavaScript. Like everything has 12,000 things out there on NPM. It's actually the only correct way to manage state in React. And it's not only built for React. You can use it with any JavaScript framework. You can even use it with Angular. I've seen people using it with Vue, even though it's kind of, I'm not sure. But yeah, it can be done. Let's take a look at what Redux does. This is a simple, extremely simple Redux refactoring where I'm going to start with a very, very simple thing called store. This store will now move state out of my component. And let's take a look at the simplest possible shape of store. So I have a store which has state, just a number, 0. And I have an action called increment, action called decrement. This one returns state +1, this one returns state by -1. And if anybody calls this function with anything else but any of these 2, I return state whatever it was before. And then I create this store, and then I can bind my component to that store. So this is where Redux would start. What are the Redux principles? First is that state is centralized. There is one single central state store for the entire application, one and only one. This state is immutable. You cannot make changes to it. This is true about any React state. You don't mutate this .state.counter++. That's bad. We know that already. And Redux just builds on top of that. State changes are only possible through functions called reducers. Let's not go into why they are called that way. There is a reason. And another strict principle is that data flow is strictly unidirectional. It cannot flow in both directions like it does with Vue, which is something that I don't like, one of the reasons why I'm not too happy with it. But anyway, let's take a look at some terminology. State is application data. Store is the state container. store simply contains state. Reducers are functions which manipulate that data, and actions are functions that indicate intent to change data or to invoke some kind of state change. And this is this unidirectionality. State defines user interface. Actually, user interface is built from state. User interface will trigger actions. Actions will invoke reducers. Reducers will update the state, and state will then refresh in. Reducers will update the store. Store will update the state, and it is one circle which always goes in this one direction. This is the actual flow. We have this user interface, and then the user clicks a button, and then what happens, it triggers an action creator, which dispatches an action in a store, and then that store sends that action to a reducer. And then reducer executes its logic, returns the new state back to the store, and then store updates the UI if necessary. Good. Let's take a look inside of every Redux action. Let's imagine that we have a payload. Every action has a payload. This is something that we send into the action. Like, for example, to do sleep. We send this to an action creator, which turns that into an actual action. So this action will receive this type, which is the critical component, and it will have this payload. Action creator can modify the payload. It can add more things like default state, maybe, if it's not passed into it. And then when we have this action, it sends this action into the store, and store then dispatches it to all reducers. Inside of each reducer, store will send actual state and action. And then reducer will first have to check, is this action for me at all? And if the action is not for that reducer, then it just returns the state, the original state. And if this action is actually intended for me, then I do manipulation and I return a new state. And this state must not be mutated directly from the original one. If, let's say, original state was to do, I cannot say like state.todo and then set something else. It has to be a new instance of an object, which is typically a copy of the original state with some manipulation done on top of that. Reducers must be pure functions. They cannot have any side effects. They cannot mutate anything. They can only operate on state they receive, and they must return some state, some new state or the original state. That is true of Redux in its originally intended form. There are variations of Redux which allow something that looks like direct state manipulation, but it's not, and that's why I dislike it. Actually, what happens then? Once reducer has completed its job, it returns the result, which is either new state or old state, over to the store. Store runs a comparison. Did the state actually change? If state, old state, equals result, it means nothing changed, then we do nothing. If state changed, which means result is different from known state, then it simply triggers bindings, which in the end results in the UI being updated. So let's take a look at that. I'm just quickly going to run through a couple of demos before I jump to our simpler demo with Redux. So I'm going to wire up this counter with Redux. So here I have my reducer function. It receives state, which is default 0. It receives action. Action can be any of these two. And then if this one, then plus. If that one, then minus. Otherwise, state. That's it. It doesn't mutate. Well, it's difficult to mutate an integer or actually a number value directly. But if it gets more complicated, we will see it soon. We will not be doing any state mutations. And then my counter actually is not just my counter component. You can see it does not have any state anymore. I have taken all that out. It doesn't belong here. This is just, let's say, view, if you really want to talk MVC or MVP. It is just the view part. And what I have here is binding, where I'm binding my component to the counter state. And for that binding, I'm using this map state to props, which is the function which says when it receives state, whatever current application state is, it exposes it as a property called counter on whichever object is bound to this piece of state. So when I go back to my counter component, it will have property called this props counter. Also, when I click plus or minus, it will call props increase or props decrease, which is nothing but actions. So I will have action increase, action decrease with this map dispatch to props. I'm mapping these two into props object of whichever component binds them. And this is my action creators. They receive no arguments, and they simply dispatch the increase action. Increase action sends this payload, or actually action, over to every reducer. This will trigger my reducer function. Reducer function will check if it's for them or not, and it will execute its logic. So when I refresh that, it is still the same stuff, just very, very nice, completely detached, concerns completely separated. I can do that not only with single state, I can combine multiple different reducers. So what I can do is I can have a situation such as this, where I have to-dos, stop talking, start closing the session down, drink beer later. And then I can, click this, and then it updates that summary. So these live as two separate states. And they actually live as two separate state objects. I have counter state here, I have counter reducer, I have to-do state, and to-do reducer. And each of them handles a separate chunk of my overall application state. And then I have store, which actually combines these two into a single reducer. So I have a hierarchy of reducers, which allows me to have reducers, every reducer function be concerned only of the subset of state. And my store will then be able to notify only the necessary reducers when a change happens on a subset of a store. And it knows that based on actions. It knows which one to call and when. And it also knows which subsets of state to map to each of those reducers. So I also have a more optimal version of that, where I'm binding really smallest, tiniest possible chunks of user interface to smallest possible chunks of space to get the most optimum possible rendering. And for that, I have actually my I'm going to open my debug console, and then I'm going to clear my debug console, and I'm going to refresh this, and you can see that, okay, now everything rendered. So all of them just indicated that they rendered themselves. But if I click this plus, only the counter label has re-rendered. I didn't re-render the entire component, which contains quite a lot of DOM. I just updated this single component. And again, just that one. When I add a to-do, like 1 or 12, it has updated 3 of them. But now, if I tick that off as completed, it has updated just this entry to indicate that it's crossed over, and it has updated this one of one, not both of them, not the entire label, just one single small part. This is how far you can get with Redux to optimize what kind of UI updates you get from what kinds of state changes. This is really amazingly beautiful. And now let's take a look at how we can put it together at work with simpler, with our demo. So we have our component tree into which we will inject the store and reducer. We will have only one reducer because we only have one kind of state. And this store will then dispatch or actually map specific parts of substate to each specific component. So the hierarchy doesn't matter anymore. The hierarchy is just UI hierarchy, so that I know where something is rendered from. But which component refreshes does not depend on that hierarchy. It actually depends on the state and the actual state that is bound to actual component by Redux at runtime. Also, when I click data entry, I will mark this selection. I will dispatch a specific action to the reducer. Reducer will then update the store, and store will then update the necessary components, only those that really need to be notified of that change. So I can go and take a look at that. Just before I do, I forgot to show you one very interesting thing, and allow me that, please. Why I absolutely love Redux is because of Redux development tool. So let's just do this like this, and then let's add to do stop now. 12 minutes to go. And then I will click this one, and then this one again. And then I will go to Redux tools. And then I will say, okay, I want to see those changes as they happened in the past. So it can replay, it can time travel, it actually notices every single change. Implementing undo is like 15 seconds in Redux. It's just beautiful. You can save this state out as JSON. You can load state as JSON. You can ship the state over to debug department, or imagine like your customer happens to have a problem, like you detect the problem, you take the Redux state, just ship that together with everything to your developer. He can get the same state that the user have at the moment of error. Beautiful. So this is something that Redux gives you just out of the box. Let's take a look at how we combine this with our component. So here I have one workspace which is React, one workspace which is AL. I'm going to go into my Redux folder, I'm going to go into reducer function, and I'm going to set breakpoint on state change. And then, of course, I'm going to run my, I have to open an AL file if I want to run AL. So I'm now deploying the component over to BC. Then I have to go to debug. I have to start. So I don't care about this one. I care about Chrome BC. So I'm attaching Chrome to running BC instance. I get this. I sign in. I will click here and then see my breakpoint hits. I'm in my reducer. I can inspect everything. I can really debug through all my original JavaScript code, regardless of the fact that I have very uglified bundle running out there in Business Central. So that's how easy it is to bind these things together with all the tools that I have presented. And then one last final touch. I'm going to do and present a way to mock this entire Business Central web client so that your developers, and sometimes I know companies that have web department who is in charge of developing for web, and then, you know, they always have difficulties talking to AL department, which is in charge of AL code. So it's always difficult to know exactly what will they ship, how do you really bind it up and wire it up all together with the controller then. So let's take a look at what I've done here. So I have a folder which I call BC mock, and this also goes on my blog. It's actually already in GitHub, just my private repository. As soon as I, you know, document it up together, that I'm happy that it's in good shape, it goes out. Here I have this mock folder where I'm mocking Business Central, and I'm mocking absolutely everything. I'm mocking AL compiler, I'm mocking page runtime, I'm mocking the Microsoft Dynamics NAV framework components in JavaScript, absolutely everything. Because I want to have exactly the same experience. I even have busy state change mock so that you can see how the component will see that state has changed, absolutely everything. And I even mock the look and feel. So when I run this, of course, I first have to deploy this to Business Central. Actually, I didn't have to. I can just go to React, and I can run this part. And then your web developers will see, yeah, wake up, wakey, wakey. Come on. Let's stop. Let's go to this. It's compiled, so whatever. This should work now. Okay, I will just run. I will close this. I will run it again. Okay, my tasks are wiring up. When webpack is up and running, I will stop. Actually, I will skip over to, okay, everything should be fine. The debug console is empty. So let's see. It should work. Yeah. So it looks like a page in Business Central as much as necessary. And yes, you can just keep developing. So everything that a web developer does will behave exactly the same way with Business Central. They can even mock the latency of the network to see what it would look like on a slower network. So this is like a free gift from me to community this year. just something that I've been playing with recently. So I hope you will like it when it's out there, published on GitHub. And yes, that's it. Tomorrow, do not miss Waldo's and my session. We will be talking not about controller-ins, but there will be quite some React there. There will be integrations with APIs in Business Central. So this session is going to be tomorrow at 11 a.m. Absolutely do not miss. And we will have a killer demo there, really, a killer demo. So that's it. Thank you. Now we have the traditional T-shirt giveaway and mic throwaway stage. So I have to throw this to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Works.
Works, awesome.
Works.
Thank you for the session, first of all. And apart from that, how do you see testability when it comes to CI/CD processes? How do you get these things aligned with?
I see it like pretty nicely. So the thing is, I actually wanted to show that here, and I couldn't. I actually wanted to show Vue, I wanted to show Angular, and then when I went, my original ideas changed. So testability taps nicely into that. Redux is highly testable, React is highly testable. There are frameworks for JavaScript testing that you can tap into CI/CD, like DevOps CI/CD, just as you can tap Business Central or extension deployments through DevOps. So anything you can imagine, any kind of testability, it will just be nice. What will be a problem is how do you really make sure that you are testing the actual integration when stuff is coming from Business Central to JavaScript and what goes back. Well, you can use the mock. So this mock can be used for tests. That's one of the reasons why I developed it. So you can put it in there. It will actually simulate the entire working of the NST and web service and AL infrastructure. So yep,
perfect.
Deserve this shirt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Don't be too far.
Thank you for another nice session.
Thank you.
In the past, you also used control add-ins to enrich the UI.
Okay.
With components, and you can also use local resources like serial communication and stuff to integrate the local resources into the UI. There are various cloud solutions, and in the cloud you have to, but is there also a way to connect local resources in your UI fully on-premise, so you don't need any services?
One word, and it's a crucial word I didn't catch. Integrate what sources?
Local resources, like serial communications. Like a serial port or something.
Okay, that kind of stuff. Well, you can do that. It's possible. Like you could. Yeah, there are things you could do with what are they called? The name is escaping me. Web. Oh crap. Not web services. Web something. Yeah, the name is just escaping me. You can call TCP/IP from web to talk directly to processes which are running on your machine. So if it's the same source, then browsers today will allow you to actually place those kinds of calls. So they are similar to REST. They are just not REST. So they are a different layer, separate layer. They don't go through coarse rules which are limiting your possibilities. They're actually allowing you to access any kind of locally running service that you have on your machine. Okay. So you could do that. You could expose a service which runs as like an application in Windows that exposes a TCP/IP port which will listen to invocations which are exactly the same as REST. So it will accept REST calls. It's not called webhooks. It's called WebSockets. Crap, yes. WebSockets, thank you.
Thank you.
So WebSockets can do that for you.
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
Come on. We have 2 more minutes. Okay, there's a question. Careful, I almost killed the person 2 years ago. So.
Have you tried some Azure builds for...
Azure?
I mean, in pipelines.
Yeah, of course you can. Yes, you can use Azure pipelines, you can integrate DevOps with this.
Do you have something?
I myself do
preset?
not. So
Yeah.
my problem is, I see DevOps as infrastructure, and I try to let other people handle infrastructure. So I myself, I will prepare, test stuff and code, but I will not set up pipelines. So I know that it can be done. I'm not the person who can tell you exactly what and how to do that. I let infrastructure people handle that. So yeah, but yes, a good question, and give me my mic back. Yep. I'm a geek, I'm a developer, I just don't want to set up those kinds of tasks. Anything else? Come on, 1 more minute. Yeah. Oops, sorry, Peter.
When to detach this web app from Business Central, when to integrate into Business Central? Let's say for warehousing, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. In my view, everything that can be detached should be detached. So you shouldn't really be putting too much into control-it-in. If you can build a separate interface that talks using API with Business Central, then that's a preferable way to handle it. Come to our session tomorrow, we'll talk about that. So, when you want to be inside Business Central, I would say these are the situations when you actually want to have full access to Business Central flow. Like, for example, you click a button and it runs a lookup page with items, and then you want to select an item and return it back over to your control-it-in immediately. So that's something which is more complicated when you completely detach. And it's much easier if it's integrated together within the control-it-in that talks directly to Business Central rather than through API. But I should say, it all depends on your scenarios. Both are possible, both are viable. I have shown one approach here. I'll show another approach tomorrow, or Waldo and I.
Thank you. Hvala.
Molim. Oh, one more question, yeah? We have 22 seconds. I will give you more. They stole time from me in the beginning.
Have you
Yeah.
talked to the Microsoft AL people about making the product compiler more friendly and aware of non-AL code and VS code?
Well, so the very theoretical question, I think.
Well, I mean, have you talked to them about that? Because, I mean,
Yeah.
you say that basically tries to compile all the AL.
Yeah, well, I can complain about that. I can actually raise issues on Git, but I cannot tell you when they will fix that.
But you have complained, right?
No, I have complained in the past. They listened, they didn't listen, so yeah. And I will complain in the future, and they will listen, and they will not listen. So it's, they listen. It's not that they don't. They actually listen very much. It's just, they have their budgets and scopes and customers to support. So yeah, AL compiler and how nicely it plays with Node, it's not really. You learn how to live with that, and yeah, so. Look at this. Waiting for you. Come on. No? Really? Okay, go. Thank you very much once again, and see you around.